There's a problem. We need to go.
In New York, a widower named Victor infiltrates a crime empire run by the cruel kingpin Alphonse Hoyt, and soon fits right in with the gang. In just a few months, Victor gains the respect and trust of his peers due to his efficiency and professionalism. However, he doesn't take the time to get to know his colleagues. He keeps to himself, saying little, and maintains a poker face in all situations. He doesn't have ambition, he just executes orders without asking why. Mostly because he doesn't really care to know the reasons for the sheer bloodshed around him. In the chaos of the criminal world, Victor maintains a calm facade, cool and collected. By design, no one knows much about him. All they can see is the distant look in his eyes. After spending his days in such a schooled demeanor, Victor returns to his cold, quiet apartment, where he spends most of the evening rewatching home videos of his late wife and their young daughter Delphine, which brings him haunted happiness, until he falls asleep in front of the TV. One day, as he waits for a job, Victor hangs out with his ambitious colleague Darcy and watches him take care of his newborn, Theo. As Victor quietly watches on, Darcy narrates how he found profound meaning as a father and describes the trials of his relationship with his girlfriend. What's this inexplicable, pained look in Victor's eyes? However, soon, Darcy gets an alarming phone call, alerts the rest of the men, and rushes to Alphonse's mansion. There, the men are led to the basement where they find one of their colleagues, Paul's, strangled body in a freezer. As the men process their shock, Alphonse arrives with more of his men and becomes enraged at what happened to the loyal man. To make matters worse, Alphonse notices a ripped-up piece of paper in Paul's frozen hands, pries it out, and sees an incomplete phrase. Then, as he tries to figure out the meaning behind the note, he sees another piece of paper in the dead man's mouth, slowly pulls it out, and finds a small shred of a photograph. Upon further inspection, Alphonse learns that the shred of picture fits in with the ones he's been receiving for the last 3 months, and becomes overwhelmed with rage and indignation. His mind races with trying to answer the obvious question on everyone's mind. Who would dare play such a tormenting psychological game with the kingpin? Taking the death of Paul, who has been working hard to find out the source of these threats to heart, Alphonse tries to put together what he knows so far. Alphonse gathers his men and heads to the Jamaican gang's territory.
They're not sanctioned to kill me.
Losing his patience, Alphonse shoots and kills the leader Harry, which soon starts a gunfight between Harry's and Alphonse's men. All hell breaks loose as bullets fly everywhere and numerous men are killed. Then, as the madness continues, Alphonse is cornered and retreats until Victor comes out of nowhere and rescues him by killing the men. In the aftermath, after all Harry's men are killed, Darcy notices Victor's injuries, which he was too adrenaline-driven to feel, and helps him. Recognizing that Victor bravely sacrificed himself and saved his life, Alphonse gives Victor a subtle nod of acknowledgement and gratitude from across the room, which means a lot in the ruthless world of crime. Then, Victor calmly drives home with the same vacant expression on his face. There, he eats ramen straight out of a plastic cup and concludes his long day like every other, by rewatching the home videos until he falls asleep. Elsewhere, a beautician named Beatrice, who has recently survived a horrific car accident, goes to the hospital for her checkup. There, the doctor finally removes the bandages on her face, which reveal a gruesome scar, and somberly informs her that, despite doing everything they can to completely restore her facial features, they couldn't remove the scars. Despite being grateful that the doctors have been able to reconstruct most of her features, Beatrice silently cries, knowing her life would never be the same. Deeply saddened, Beatrice returns to her apartment, which she shares with her mother Valentine, and tries to process everything her doctor told her. Later that night, Beatrice goes out on the balcony of her apartment, which faces Victor's apartment, and watches Victor, like she's been doing for the past few months. But this time, Victor notices her staring at him from across the street. Then, Beatrice suddenly finds the courage and waves at Victor, who blankly returns the greeting. Beatrice retreats quickly and spends some quality time with her mother. Then, she locks herself in her bedroom, looks at the mirror, and cries at the new image of herself. The next day, when Victor opens his mailbox, he finds a note from Beatrice in which she introduces herself and gives him her number. That evening, driven mostly by curiosity rather than anything else, Victor calls Beatrice, and the duo talks on the phone while watching each other from their balconies. The next evening, Victor and Beatrice go out to dinner and get to know each other.
You speak French?
Hungarian.
You don't have an accent.
I work very hard to get rid of it.
Beatrice ignores the kids in the restaurant gawking at her and making her feel self-conscious, and asks Victor to take her somewhere. Victor quietly accepts her request, and after the duo drives for a few minutes, Beatrice drops a bombshell.
I saw you kill this man. This is the man who hit my car when he was drunk. I want you to kill him. If you don't do it, I'll call the police and tell them what I saw.
Shocked to his core, Victor tries to resist, but is immediately cut off by Beatrice, who threatens to report his crimes to the police unless he agrees to her terms, and bitterly adds that the drunk driver who caused her car accident had only served 3 weeks for what he did to her. Outraged by the conversation and Beatrice's threats, Victor reacts violently, holds Beatrice at gunpoint, and warns her to change her mind to no avail. During this altercation, Victor accidentally fires the gun, breaking his car window and making a scene. Luckily, before Beatrice's target notices, the duo speeds away.
You didn't pay.
Later, Beatrice returns to her apartment, locks herself in her bedroom, and goes through the newspaper clippings that reported her accident, which reminds her of the fateful night that changed her life forever, and the pain and numerous surgeries that followed. She then goes through each item she saved with a deep longing for the person she once was, and quietly aches knowing she will never find her. Meanwhile, utterly disturbed by the events of the night, Victor returns to his apartment, and instead of watching the home videos, he spends the evening discreetly watching Beatrice from afar and trying to figure out as much as he can. How the roles have reversed, eh? A few nights later, Victor meets with his late wife's uncle, Gregor.
It's Andras gave us the body for your grave.
The duo then heads to meet one of Gregor's friends named Andras, who sells Victor a sniper.
It all Russian PSO scopes comes with bayonet suppressor as well.
I'll take it.
Then, deeply missing his family and the happy life he once had, Victor returns to his apartment and rewatches the home videos on repeat until the next morning.
Hi. My shoot today.
At dawn, Victor leaves his apartment and discreetly surveils an Albanian kingpin named Ilir Brozi and his crew.
Jo, diçka s'është në rregull.
Once he finishes assessing how much the Albanian gang knows about the disappearance, Victor drives to an abandoned ship outside of the city where he has imprisoned Ilir's brother. There, he feeds the tied-up and blindfolded man, takes pictures of him, and quickly leaves, without even uttering a word of response to the desperate man's numerous questions and pleas.
If you let me go, he will spare you. My brother, he will not stop looking for me.
Elsewhere, Beatrice spends a day looking for work and returns home disheartened. A few minutes later, Victor arrives at Beatrice's apartment with some surveillance pictures of the drunk driver, and is surprised to learn that Beatrice has been following her target's every move and has been taking detailed notes of his itinerary. Despite his surprise, Victor maintains his cold attitude without giving away much of his thoughts. As Victor and Beatrice continue their awkward conversation, Valentine wakes up from her nap and joyfully greets Victor.
Oh, we have company.
She can't hear us. She lost most of her hearing as a child.
Whom she believes to be Beatrice's love interest, and quickly gives him an old photo album so that he can learn more about Beatrice and see how beautiful she once was. Then, with the good intention of wanting to put her daughter in the best light, Valentine subtly and lovingly restyles Beatrice's hair so that it can cover her scars. Despite the benign action, Victor notices Beatrice tense up in self-consciousness and die inside, and briefly sympathizes with the young woman's predicament. It feels like these two have a lot more in common than they realize. Quickly, Victor reverts to his cold demeanor while Beatrice summons her vengeful persona and tells him that she needs the drunk driver killed as soon as possible. Elsewhere, hoping to prove his worth to his boss, Darcy takes over Paul's investigation and starts to look into the numerous threats and ominous notes Alphonse has been receiving over the last 3 months. His careful investigation then leads him to a shady neighborhood, where he finds a local man and learns that the mysterious man who took the photographs has been seen getting a cab and takes the make and model of the vehicle. A few days later, while Victor continues monitoring Alphonse's interaction through his wiretap, he overhears his phone conversation with the mafia boss, Lon Gordon.
No, you need to come see me right now. You don't appreciate the severity of this. There's Lon. You know, people are flipping out. You want to sanction it to Harry.
Victor drops everything he's doing and heads to the rooftop of a building across the cafe, where Alphonse and Lon hold their meeting, and surveils them with a sniper rifle. However, a few minutes later, Victor receives a call from a frantic Darcy.
Copy, Cora. Can you get there?
I can find it.
Yeah, look, Alphonse is there with Lon Gordon. I'll be there in 5.
As Victor tries to plan his next move amid the new orders, Alphonse and Lon continue their meeting.
Englishmen and Jamaicans, they don't send notes like this. Not if it had been killed. You know what that key is for?
Soon after talking to Darcy, one of Alphonse's right-hand men, Terry, informs his boss of the situation and escorts him out of the cafe. Moments later, Victor sends Alphonse a chilling text from an unknown number, right after which, utter chaos ensues as he starts shooting at Alphonse and his men.
Darcy's coming from the...
Soon, the men figure out where the shots are coming from and follow Darcy's lead, rush to the building across the street. Meanwhile, Beatrice, who has been following Victor, watches this unfold, soon realizes that Victor's in grave danger, and tries to find a way to help him.
Luco, watch the elevator. Yeah! Duff and Charles, twin stairs, kill right back.
As all hell breaks loose with bullets flying everywhere, Victor finishes his tasks, runs for his life, and just as he leaves through the back door of the building, Beatrice shows up in her car and offers him a ride. The duo then drives away in Beatrice's car, while Darcy and the rest of the men closely chase them and miraculously evade capture. Victor then manages to convince Darcy that he just arrived on the scene and boldly joins him and the men in trying to find the gunman.
Go around!
I'm sorry I made him late.
What's going on? See you later.
Once everyone catches their breath, Darcy informs Alphonse of what he learned on his investigation.
Well, I must have led him to something, because he was wasted for it.
Then, once he's alone with Darcy, Victor tries to advise the ambitious man about his dangerous investigation.
You saw what happened to Paul. I don't want anything to happen to you.
That evening, Beatrice goes over to Victor's apartment to give him his sniper bag. Grateful for her valuable help, Victor finally opens up to Beatrice and tells her about his life and the tragedy that shaped it.
A bullet went through a wall. My daughter was killed while she slept. We were going to testify, my wife and I. But the man responsible for it all, Alphonse.
Suddenly, Victor's whole demeanor makes sense. Beatrice and Victor converse for a couple of hours, and Beatrice leaves.
I don't want to be one of those people that reminds you when you're the one who's going to help me forget.
Once again, aching to feel closer to his family and relive the happiest time of his life, Victor rewatches the Sweet Home videos and finds himself tearfully smiling, overcome with emotions and the longing for a family that will never be. Then, to remind himself of his purpose for enduring everything, he projects the video and plays it over a wall of pictures filled with Alphonse, his men, and the Albanian gang, and vows to make each one pay. After spending a sleepless night, Victor continues working on his revenge plan the next morning. Elsewhere, Beatrice goes to see her former boss, who warmly welcomes her and gives her her job back. There's some humanity left. Elsewhere, Alphonse gets increasingly paranoid and concerned, as it seems his enemy is always a step ahead of him. Following his gut feeling, Alphonse goes through his phone and finds that it's been bugged. A few days later, Victor goes to Alphonse's warehouse, sneaks in, and checks on the explosives he hid in the roof. Moments later, Alphonse and the crew arrive in the warehouse, and Victor's forced to stop his planning. He quietly makes his way down and blends in with the men. Later that night, Victor calls Gregor to ask his advice on the explosive devices and the new security system installed in the warehouse. Soon, Beatrice comes to bring him some food and finds his secret room filled with his revenge plans.
Now you know everything.
So, what you said on the phone, is that your plan?
Don't worry about it. I'll be around long enough to do what you asked me to do.
As Victor coldly explains himself, Beatrice scolds him for not looking out for himself, gives him the food, and storms out of the apartment, leaving him confused by the interaction. But before he can try to figure out what's going on with Beatrice, Victor receives a notification on his phone that informs him that his package has been delivered. After crying for his brother, Ilir then takes the shreds of photographs he receives, puts them together with the ones he received before, and a picture of a family starts to form. Meanwhile, as Victor eats the home-cooked meal Beatrice brought him, he hears a phone call on Alphonse's wiretap.
This guy, like, clean? Yeah. I don't know, man. What if our problem shows up?
Unbeknownst to Victor, Alphonse finishes setting up the trap with Terry and hangs up the phone, with the hope of finally finding out who the threat is. Victor, be careful what you do with this information. Soon, Darcy arrives at Victor's apartment and asks him to drop everything and join him.
She your girlfriend?
Nah, that ain't serious.
You never mentioned her before.
The duo drives to the location where the cab was last seen and finds themselves in front of a cemetery. After looking around in the dead of night and finding nothing, Darcy plans to return and visit the cemetery the next morning to learn more about the matter. A few minutes later, the duo's late-night escapade is cut short when Victor receives a text and leaves shortly after.
Come on in. The text said not to tell anyone I was coming. I told him had something to do.
Alphonse then starts rambling that he's figured out the source of the threats and shares his belief that it's someone he's wronged and caused severe pain and suffering. But instead of showing remorse, Alphonse threatens that on top of murdering his blackmailer's family, he's prepared to kill and destroy anything and anyone he cares about. Despite keeping a calm appearance, Victor starts to freak out, realizing how close Alphonse is to figuring everything out. But before he loses his mind, he hears some good news and is relieved.
You saved my life, only to be the one who kills me. He's probably wondering right now what I'm thinking.
After the tense few minutes, Alphonse invites Victor, who has managed to keep a poker face, to share a meal with him and breaks the tension. Feeling cornered, Victor decides to speed up his plan and drives out to the abandoned ship the next morning. There, after feeding his desperate prisoner, he plays a psychological game on him and convinces him to make a video for Ilir so that he can come with his goons and rescue him.
Make
sure he gets it. We gotta go fast.
Once he has the video, Victor decides to finally reveal himself and removes the blindfold from the prisoner. As soon as Ilir's brother sees the kidnapper, he stutters from shock and wonders how the man he and his crew believe to have killed survived the ordeal and is standing in front of him. As the kidnapper starts to bring up past events, Victor can no longer control his emotions and aggressively screams at his prisoner that he survived and made it this far, with only revenge on his mind. Then, before the prisoner can process this blindsiding information, Victor opens a drain and watches stoically as rats infest the basement and cover the utterly panicked prisoner. Victor watches for a few minutes as the psychologically tormented man who's forced to helplessly watch as rats cover him screams out of sheer panic and suffering. Then, Victor fatally shoots his prisoner and calmly leaves. Once outside, Victor takes a moment to process the ordeal as a beginning to the end, the culmination of all the hard and dangerous work he's been doing for the past 2 years, and silently acknowledges the man grief and trauma have forced him to become. Then, Victor removes the memory card from the camera, puts it in an envelope, and prepares it for mailing. Moments later, Victor receives a phone call from Darcy.
I can meet him alone if you're busy. No, I'll be there.
Forced to improvise his plan, Victor meets with Beatrice, gives her the envelope and asks her to mail it for him, and rushes to meet Darcy at the graveyard. There, Victor learns that Darcy has been following Paul's every step, talked to the manager, and has received a list of all the people buried there. Darcy then carefully studies it while paying special attention to the Hungarian section. As his world starts to close in on him, Victor meets with Gregor and shares his predicament.
You can walk away still. Not too late. I think you're afraid that when it's over, it won't mend your heart.
Elsewhere in her apartment, Beatrice puts on a beautiful white dress, puts on makeup, and heads to Victor's apartment to ask him out. However, on her way there, the neighborhood kids bullied her by calling her names and throwing stones at her. Despite her best efforts to run past the terrible kids, a stone hits Beatrice and she falls down. Terrified by all the bleeding, Beatrice runs back to her apartment to nurse her wounds. Soon, Victor arrives to ask her about the package and is alarmed to see her injured. Once Victor makes sure Beatrice is okay, he thanks her for her cooperation with the package and asks her out. Victor then goes to a clothing store and buys the same beautiful white dress to replace Beatrice's ruined one, puts it in a gift box, and prepares to surprise Beatrice with it. He then sits by the courtyard watching young girls play, daydreams about Delphine, and is immediately flooded with warmth and joy. He decides to pause his day and enjoy this rare moment of peace and happiness, and spends a few minutes sitting by the yard, smiling. Unfortunately, this rare moment of bliss is interrupted by a chilling phone call from Darcy.
Yeah, Laszlo Carrick.
Now this shit went down about 9 months before we were on the crew. Laszlo Carrick, you know the name?
No.
Vic? You there, Vic?
The phone call shatters the momentary peace, pulls Victor back to reality, and reminds him how dangerously close Darcy is to getting to the truth. Victor then scolds himself for being distracted from his life's purpose, discards the beautiful gift he bought Beatrice, and picks her up. On the drive, Beatrice expresses how much she cares for Victor, but he coldly turns her down and breaks her heart. He then drives Beatrice to the bar the drunk driver frequents so that she can witness the attack and parks a few blocks away. As Beatrice watches in mixed emotions of shock and horror, Victor blindsides the drunk driver and attacks him. Despite having her wish realized, Beatrice freezes in shock. The duo continues the drive back in utter silence, afraid to even look at one another or acknowledge what happened. Victor then drops Beatrice off at her apartment and quietly continues to his. Elsewhere, Darcy takes Alphonse and the men to the graveyard and reveals his investigative skills.
So you're saying it's someone who knew him?
They must have. Because this guy's dead, right? Right?
In the next few days, the guilt gnaws at Beatrice, who one day becomes too preoccupied at work, messes up, and quits her precious job. Then, hoping to get to the bottom of everything, Alphonse calls his enemy Ilir.
Whoever's doing it took my brother.
And you're sure you saw the father take a bow?
As everyone prepares for war, Darcy calls Victor and asks him to join them as soon as possible. However, hoping to spare his only friend from the looming battle, Victor asks him to pick up and sends him to his apartment. Meanwhile, Victor heads to Alphonse's warehouse and, with a drawn gun and timed explosives, waits for Alphonse, his men, and Ilir to show up so that he can finally execute his carefully laid plans and avenge the tragic death of his family. Elsewhere, Beatrice finds a note from Victor, heads to the drunk man's residence, and cries with happiness as she sees that, despite being banged up, the drunk driver who ruined her life is still alive. At the warehouse, after waiting for the kingpins for a while, Victor soon realizes that Beatrice never sent the package to Ilir. To confirm his suspicions, Victor calls Beatrice.
I called him back because I feel something for you.
I don't want you to die, so I thought that if I could just mess up one of your things,
we can run away.
They'd find us.
Meanwhile, Darcy arrives at Victor's house and continuously bangs on the door. When he finds no response, Darcy, who's worried for his friend's safety, breaks down the door and enters, calling out for Victor. However, Darcy soon gets the shock of his life. All the pieces fall into place for Darcy, who soon works out that Victor is Laszlo Carrick, the ghost he's been hunting and the one wreaking havoc on everyone around. Before Darcy can fully process this revelation, he runs into Beatrice, who arrives at Victor's apartment looking for him.
Just I want you to go to your apartment now. Go there now and stay there away from me, okay?
Pushed into a corner and hoping to rescue Beatrice, Victor heads to Alphonse's mansion, where Alphonse, his men, and the Albanian gang await him. Despite the change of venue, it seems Victor got what he wanted after all. Soon, Darcy takes Beatrice to the mansion and presents her to Alphonse.
What happened to your face?
Car accident. What happened to yours?
No. Let her go.
You listen to me. You get in your shitty car that does start.
Then, Darcy fills in the missing pieces of the photograph and proves the identity of Victor to everyone. A few minutes later, everyone's phone simultaneously rings. Moments later, to everyone's utter shock, Victor arrives at the mansion and crashes into it with his truck. Then, all hell breaks loose as everyone engages in an intense gunfight, while still recovering from the shock and wreckage. As the battle continues, Victor detonates a bomb, causing more carnage. Despite Victor's ability to single-handedly take out many of his enemies, the intense battle continues for a while. Then, as he goes up the stairs, Victor walks up on Darcy with a clear chance to kill him, but decides to spare his life and continues on his way. Upstairs, the coward Alphonse tries to hide behind his men and sends each of them to their deaths. Meanwhile, Beatrice frees herself, remembers that she still has the memory card from earlier, and decides to play it. Watching the video of his brother, Ilir becomes infuriated and reneges on his partnership deal with Alphonse.
What is he saying? Don't you raise that fucking gun! Let's load the fucking gun!
Victor soon arrives on the scene, rescues Beatrice, and the duo proceed to head out until they run into Darcy.
Did you choose not to kill me because I got a wife and a kid? I didn't kill you because I've got you.
Once Victor finally avenges his family's death and walks out of the mansion, an inexplicable calm washes over him for the first time in years, finally giving him peace and a chance to start over. He and Beatrice walk away hand in hand, both better for finding each other, kiss, and drive off into their future together.